The wind howled
Bon,
down the market lanes, stirring leaves and whispers as Emma's sneakers splashed through muddy puddles. Her chest felt tight again, not from running, but from the emotion, knotting her ribs. She had heard it. A yelp. Short. Pained. And it had come from Thompson's stall. She edged closer, the scent of rust and wet wood filling her nose. Underneath the table covered in mismatched hardware, something stirred. Amber eyes blinked back at her from the shadows. A German shepherd lay motionless, its ribs visible through patches of matted fur. One leg was twisted oddly, swollen and crusted in blood. The dog didn't flinch, didn't cower, just watched her, silently. Emma crouched, her breath fogging in the October air. "Hey, boy," she whispered, voice trembling. The dog's ears twitched. Behind her, Thompson growled, "Not your business, kid." Emma didn't blink. "How much?" He laughed. "You serious?" $5. But he won't last the night." Her hand drifted to her coat pocket. The folded $5 bill. Her emergency inhaler money. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Only use it if you run out, Em." She looked again at the dog, who hadn't taken his eyes off her. There was something in that gaze. Not fear, not begging. A question. Emma stood and placed the bill in Thompson's calloused hand. "Sold," he grunted. The German shepherd let out a breath. Not a sigh. A release. She knelt, gently lifting the edge of the tablecloth. "It's okay now," she murmured. And for the first time, the dog moved, slowly, painfully, but with unmistakable dignity, toward her. Rain began to patter softly on the canvas tents as she called out, "Mrs. Patterson, I need help." Back at Mrs. Patterson's aging station wagon, Emma coaxed the wounded dog up into the back seat with gentle encouragement and soft whispers. Every movement made him wince, yet he never once bared his teeth. His weight settled heavily on the cracked vinyl seat, as though he hadn't rested in days. Mrs. Patterson peered at the animal over her glasses, sighing. "Child, your father's going to raise Cain." "I'll fix it before he gets home," Emma promised. The drive home was quiet, except for the occasional wet snuffle from the dog. Emma kept one hand resting on his paw the whole way. He didn't pull away. In the garage, she laid out an old blanket and filled a bowl with water. The dog drank greedily, then laid down with a deep, ragged sigh. Emma gathered her allowance money, still saved in a candy tin shaped like a rabbit, and sprinted to the corner store for antiseptic, bandages, and gauze. She worked in silence, carefully dabbing at the crusted blood on the dog's leg. He watched her without blinking, flinching only once when the alcohol stung. "You need a name," she whispered. As she worked, her fingers found a thin chain hidden beneath his tangled coat. She tugged gently, revealing a grimy metal tag. "Scout, K9 unit." "Scout," she repeated softly. The German shepherd raised his head slightly. His ears twitched. "That's your name," she smiled. "Scout." And for the first time since she'd found him, the dog licked her hand. Outside, the sky darkened. The clock ticked toward 7. Her father would be home soon, and Emma's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the fierce conviction that this mattered. Scout wasn't just a dog. He was something else, something broken, something brave. And he had chosen her. The front door creaked open, and Thomas Wells stepped inside, soaked in sawdust and fatigue. He kicked off his boots, expecting silence, but was met instead by the unmistakable shape of a large dog sitting calmly beside his daughter. His voice dropped into that deep, tight place it went when angry. "Emma Catherine Wells, what is that doing in our house?" Emma stood her ground, chest tight with fear and pride. "His name is Scout. I found him hurt. Thompson was being cruel. I only paid $5. He's quiet. He's good. Thomas's gaze narrowed. Where'd you get $5? She looked at her shoes. My inhaler money. The room froze in that terrible quiet. His hands balled into fists. You risked your life for a stray dog? I had to help him, she whispered. No one else would. Something moved in the space between them. Not sound, not breath. Scout slowly approached, ears low, body relaxed, and sat at Thomas's feet, not begging, not pleading, waiting. Thomas flinched, stepped back. I don't care how tame he looks. We can't keep a dog, especially one this size. Emma's eyes welled up. Just until he's better. Please. Before Thomas could speak, a knock echoed at the door. Mrs. Patterson stood on the porch, hands folded, eyes steady. I thought I should explain, she said. The dog was in a terrible state. Emma couldn't leave him. Thomas's shoulders sagged under the weight of 2 women and 1 silent animal. 3 days, he muttered at last. He stays in the garage, and Monday we take him to the shelter. Emma threw her arms around him. Thank you, Daddy. You'll see. He's special. Thomas watched them walk Scout to the garage, a strange feeling pooling low in his gut. A name rose unbidden in his mind. Michael. And a chill swept through him like a distant memory, returning too soon. Scout's recovery astonished them all. Within days, the swelling in his leg faded. Antibiotics from Dr. Reeves, secured after Emma's tearful plea, worked like quiet miracles. By the 5th day, Scout was not only walking, but sitting straighter, watching everything with those unwavering amber eyes. Over meatloaf dinner, Emma beamed. Watch this. She raised her hand in a flat signal. Scout snapped to attention. Thomas's fork paused midair. Where'd you learn that? I didn't. He already knew. She tried another. Stay, come down. Scout obeyed each one with silent precision. Thomas leaned back, troubled. That's military training. Emma's face lit up. Maybe he belonged to someone in the army. Someone rich? Thomas shook his head slowly. Not rich. Military. That night, when the house had settled into its familiar hush, Thomas found himself drawn to the garage. Scout lay curled on an old comforter. As Thomas stepped inside, Scout lifted his head. Watchful, calm, not aggressive, just present. What's your story? Thomas murmured, more to the darkness than the dog. His hands itched. He hadn't told Emma about the dog that had mauled him when he was 12. About the scars, the nightmares. But Scout was different, controlled, deliberate. Scout rose and approached slowly, his gaze unwavering. Thomas didn't move. Only when the dog stopped just short of touching him did Thomas notice the worn tag nestled in the fur. He reached out, fingers trembling. Scout, K-9 unit, handler, Sergeant Michael Wells. Thomas's heart stopped. He stumbled back, gasping. His brother's name, Michael, lost in Afghanistan 3 years ago. His body never recovered. Scout watched him, silent, steady, as if waiting for him to catch up, as if he already knew. The next morning, Mr. Grayson pounded on their door with a bloodied chicken dangling from one hand. Your beast killed 3 of my hens, he spat, face red with fury. Thomas stepped outside, Scout at his heel. My dog's been in the garage all night. I saw him running across my yard at dawn. That's impossible, Thomas said, but doubt gnawed at him. You named the killer. Grayson snapped. That makes you liable. Emma, woken by the shouting, stepped out sleepily. What's happening? Grayson's voice dropped, venomous. Military dogs are dangerous. What if it turns on her next? Scout stepped forward, not snarling, not barking, just placing himself between Emma and Grayson. Still, alert. Later, Thomas found Scout back in the garage, exactly where he'd been left. No blood, no feathers, just stillness. But the question hung there, heavy as lead. Could it be true? That evening, Thomas sat with Emma in the kitchen. She spoke with the clarity only children can muster. Scout wouldn't hurt anything that didn't try to hurt us first. Thomas tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Outside, the black SUV passed their home again. Slow, deliberate. Emma watched from the window. "That's the third time tonight," she whispered. Scout growled low in his throat, the sound deeper than Emma had ever heard. A chill ran down Thomas's spine. Something wasn't right. The next morning, Thomas called in sick to work, for the first time in years. "I'm taking Scout to someone who might have answers," he told Emma over breakfast. "You'll stay with Mrs. Patterson." She hesitated. "Is this about the men watching our house?" Thomas's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. "What men?" Emma looked down. "Scout saw them last night. A black SUV." He growled. "Really deep." Thomas's unease turned into certainty. He dropped her off and returned to find Scout waiting by the front door, poised, as if sensing the mission ahead. The dog climbed into the truck without hesitation, settling into the passenger seat like he'd done it 100 times. "We're going to Riverdale," Thomas said aloud. "Veterans Center, if you really were Michaels." Scout's ears flicked at the sound of the name. 2 hours later, they pulled into a plain brick building with a flag fluttering out front. Thomas had come here once before, long ago, when the nightmares had made it impossible to sleep. Now, he walked in with a ghost by his side. Inside, he asked for Major Collins, retired, but still sharp. Within minutes, he was ushered into a small office where a silver-haired man looked up in recognition. "Wells, it's been years." Thomas wasted no time. "I need to know about my brother's K9 unit, about his dog." Collins's eyes darkened. "Scout went missing during the ambush, presumed dead, like Michael." "He's not dead," Thomas said. "He's in my truck." Collins went still. When Thomas brought Scout inside, the effect was immediate. The dog stood tall, posture rigid, eyes locked on Collins. "My God," Collins whispered. "It's him." Scout stood like a statue, every muscle coiled with discipline, waiting for a command that never came. Collins slowly lowered himself into his chair, eyes never leaving the dog. "You don't understand," he said softly. "Your brother wasn't just a handler. He was part of an elite operations unit. Scout was one of the most advanced dogs ever trained. Detection, tracking, even tactical response. They were bonded, closer than most soldiers." Thomas swallowed hard. "Then why declare him dead?" "Because after the ambush, there was nothing left. No bodies, just blood, wreckage, and silence. We searched, but nothing." Collins scanned Scout's microchip. The screen lit up with a confirmation that sent a shiver down Thomas's spine. It was true. This was Scout. Collins leaned in. "Be careful. If Scout survived, someone brought him back, and not officially. There's a reason he was off the grid." Thomas left Riverdale with more questions than answers. On the drive home, Scout sat silently, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. But at every curve, every shifting shadow, his ears twitched. That night, the black SUV returned. But it wasn't the only shadow creeping closer. Later, as Thomas reviewed everything at the kitchen table, Scout growled again, low, warning. 2 men slipped across the yard toward the garage. Thomas grabbed his phone and a bat. "Stay," he told Scout. Amazingly, the dog obeyed. Thomas crept out, breath held tight in his chest, heart pounding. Behind the garage, the intruders whispered urgently. "Has to be here. Tracker showed this spot." He stepped into the light. "Don't move." The men turned. One pulled a taser. Thomas swung the bat, striking the first man hard. A device clattered to the dirt. The other raised his weapon. And that's when Scout broke his command. With a blur of fur and fury, the German Shepherd launched, hitting the man's center mass. They collapsed in a tangle of limbs and yells. Thomas chased the first attacker down the drive, but the man vanished into the night. When he returned, Scout stood over the second intruder, panting but controlled. Thomas bent down and whispered, "Good boy." Red and blue lights swept across the driveway as a patrol car pulled in. Not Donovan's. The black SUV screeched to a stop. A tall man in civilian clothes stepped out, hands raised. "My name is Captain James Shepherd," he called. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Thomas raised the bat again. "Back off. I'm not your enemy. I was Michael's commanding officer when he died." The words hit harder than any weapon. Before Thomas could answer, Sheriff Donovan's car arrived. He took in the scene. Scout standing guard over a subdued man, Thomas with the bat, and Shepherd calm, still, hands open. Inside the house, the truth began to unravel. "They're contractors," Shepherd explained. "Private firm. They want to reverse engineer Scout's training. His instincts are worth millions." Scout lay by the fireplace, eyes flicking between each man as if assessing danger. Donovan nodded grimly. "We found messages on the guy's phone. He was working with Grayson." Thomas's fists clenched. "That miserable. They paid him to file complaints," Donovan said. "To push you, make you get rid of Scout." "And the tracker?" Thomas pulled the small device from his pocket. Shepherd's eyes widened. "That's how they kept finding him. He's been marked since he escaped." Emma's voice interrupted from the stairs. "Are you going to take Scout away?" Her eyes were wide, her voice small, but steady. Shepherd paused. "Scout is technically government property." "He's not property," she said. "He's family." The words hung in the air, heavier than law, more permanent than orders. Donovan entered again. "Grayson's done. Charges are being filed. But Thomas, how did Scout get here in the first place?" Thomas turned to Shepherd. Shepherd's voice dropped. Michael's last words were clear. "If anything happens to me, Scout goes to Thomas." That was his last command. Silence. Scout moved beside Thomas and rested his head against his knee. A silent answer to a question no one could ask. 2 weeks passed, but the storm of that night still echoed in Thomas's bones. Grayson had been arrested for conspiracy and endangering a minor, charges that shook the small town of Oakage to its roots. The 2 contractors were handed over to military authorities, and through Captain Shepherd's intervention, Scout was granted temporary custody with the Wells family, while the government reviewed his status. Emma didn't need an official decision to know what Scout was. He walked her to school each day, his gaze ever alert. He slept curled at the foot of her bed, rising the moment she stirred, and more than once nudged her inhaler closer before an asthma attack she hadn't sensed coming. For Thomas, the walls he'd built for years began to show cracks. He caught himself reaching down to scratch Scout's ear absent-mindedly while drinking coffee. He found comfort in the soft padding of paws across the hardwood floor. The German Shepherd had become something more than a guest. He was a presence, a tether, a silent bridge to a brother, lost but not forgotten. And in moments when Scout sat beside him, unmoving, Thomas could almost hear Michael's voice again. The porch had become their evening ritual, man and dog beneath the Montana stars. On one such night, Emma was away at her first sleepover since Scout's arrival. Thomas wondered if the dog would pace or whine. but Scout waited patiently at the window as she left, then settled on the porch as if understanding this, too, was temporary. "Just you and me tonight," Thomas said, setting his coffee down with a sigh. But Scout was already on alert, ears stiff, eyes narrowed at something in the dark. A low whine escaped his throat. Not fear, not even urgency. Something deeper. Thomas followed his gaze. "What is it?" And when he whispered Emma's name, Scout barked, sharp, loud, urgent, then bolted for the truck. Scout's urgency shattered the night's stillness. Thomas didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys and jacket. "Show me," he told the German Shepherd. Scout leapt into the truck's passenger seat, tail rigid, gaze unblinking. As Thomas turned the ignition, his phone rang. Sarah Miller's voice on the line, frantic. "The girls are gone," she said. "They were camping in the backyard tent. I checked on them 20 minutes ago. Now they're just gone." Thomas's chest tightened. "I'm on my way." When he arrived, Sheriff Donovan was already there, flashlight beams cutting through the downpour. Rain pelted the grass, drowning any footprints. "They must have slipped through the back fence," Donovan guessed. "We're close to Old Creek. It's rising fast." Thomas looked at Scout. "Find her." The dog didn't need to be told twice. He bounded across the yard, nose to the ground. He paused at the sagging slats in the fence and slipped through a narrow gap. Barked once. Waited. "He's got the scent," Thomas said. "We go around." Donovan didn't argue. They circled the block, hearts pounding, flashlights slicing the darkness, until they spotted Scout at the tree line. The dog darted into the woods, leading them through slick mud and rising wind. The rain had turned Old Creek into a torrent. Water roared nearby. Ahead, Scout disappeared into a curtain of willows. When Thomas and Donovan burst through, their lights revealed a haunting sight. An old wooden play structure, half submerged, groaning under the weight of water and time. And clinging to it, soaked and shivering, Emma and Sarah. "Dad!" Emma's voice cracked through the storm. "The bridge washed away," she cried. "We can't get back." Donovan radioed for rescue teams. "They'll take minutes," he said grimly. "That structure won't last that long." Before either man could move, Scout plunged into the water. Thomas shouted, but the dog pressed forward, muscles straining, claws digging, pushing through the current. He reached the platform and clambered up beside the girls. But instead of returning, he turned and began nudging them toward the far side of the creek. "He's guiding them upstream," Donovan said, astonished. "To higher ground," Thomas whispered, voice breaking. "He's going to save them." Scout moved like a shadow in the storm, silent, steady, unshakable. His body shielded the girls as they inched along the creek's edge, feet slipping in wet leaves and loose mud. Every time one of them faltered, he was there, nudging, bracing, steadying. Thomas and Donovan ran parallel along the ridge, trying to keep pace, flashlight beams catching glimpses of movement through the trees. "They're almost past the worst of it," Donovan called. Then the shriek of splintering wood echoed behind them, the play structure finally giving in to the current. The girls gasped. Emma froze. Scout barked, short and sharp, a command. Emma moved again. 15 more feet. 10. The creek narrowed, and then an opening. Scout herded them toward a shallow bend, where the floodwater spilled across a flat stone shelf. The girls waded across, thigh deep but safe, guided by his nudges. Sarah slipped once. Scout caught her. When Thomas reached them, Emma collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "You came," she whispered. "I followed Scout," he said. "We both did." The German Shepherd stood near the edge, soaked, shaking with cold, but alert. Always alert. Donovan knelt beside him. "You just saved 2 lives tonight." Scout didn't react to praise. He only turned his head slightly toward Emma, as if checking once more that she was truly safe. Then he lay down in the mud and rested his head on his paws, spent, but whole. In the days that followed, a new rhythm settled over the Wells household, one built on healing, trust, and quiet gratitude. The government, after reviewing Scout's case and Captain Shepard's report, granted the Wells family permanent custody. Officially, Scout was no longer property. Unofficially, he never had been. For Emma, life returned to the small joys, walking to school with Scout at her side, whispering secrets into his fur, knowing with certainty that he would never leave her. He wasn't just her protector. He was hers. Thomas, too, had changed. The man who once flinched at the sight of a dog now found himself sitting on the porch most evenings, absently stroking Scout's fur while sipping his coffee. The nightmares about war had faded, not disappeared, but softened. Sometimes he would find himself speaking aloud into the dusk, telling Scout stories he'd never told another soul, about Michael, about fear, about family. Scout never interrupted. He only listened. One evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Thomas stood at the edge of the porch, watching Scout move across the yard. Tail high, ears flicking with every sound. The October wind stirred the trees. Somewhere in the night, an owl called. Scout paused, looked back. Thomas smiled. "You found your way home, didn't you?" he said. The German shepherd returned to his side, sat down, and leaned gently into Thomas's leg. No bark, no sound, just presence. And for the first time in years, Thomas didn't feel alone. Not anymore.